All right. Well, at least the plane was flying. At least we didn't have technical difficulties there. But I guess this is how Zoom goes. There's always something. But I wanted to welcome everyone, and this is going to be a very exciting tour of the Honolulu Museum of Art, which is a beautiful historic museum with a very broad range of collection. And at this time, I would like to welcome and introduce our friends from Hawaii. Halona, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Halona Norton-Westbrook. I'm the director of the Honolulu Museum of Art, and I'm really, really delighted to be here with you today.
And we also have, would you like to introduce your colleagues that are here with us too?
Sure. I have my colleagues Ching Jen and Bud here. They can give a wave. They're part of our advancement team. And also want to give a special hello to Richard and Kurt because they are supporters of HMoA and really happy to see them here virtually.
And we are too. We're delighted to. Well, Halona, maybe you should go ahead and start sharing your screen and begin the tour. I am going to be letting people in the door as we still have some people who are coming in, but I think that we should just go ahead.
Okay, great. My assistant Amanda is helping with that. So here we are. So yeah, today I just, first of all, I want to say I'm so honored to be invited and asked to do this. It's, you know, a challenging time with COVID. We're all living through it. We're all experiencing it, technical difficulties and all. But, you know, it's really important that we continue to kind of create community and create connection wherever we can. So I'm just really delighted to be able to have this virtual connection to you, you know, from Hawaii to Long Beach or wherever you all are. And it's just really a delight and an honor to be here and be talking with you. I wanted today just to give you a little bit of background about myself. I am a new director, fairly new, started in January 2020. And I am originally from California, but most recently worked at the Toledo Museum of Art in Toledo, Ohio. If anybody has been there, it's also a fabulous museum. Yes. So I was director of curatorial affairs there before I took on this role as director, and was only on the job about 10 weeks before COVID hit. So it's been a wild ride, but delighted to be here, and we're really having a fun time, even in spite of the pandemic, thinking about the future of the museum and what it's going to be. We're working on a strategic plan at the moment with our trustees and staff that's going to take us through the next 5 years, and we're hoping to have that completed in the spring. So there's a lot of exciting things happening here. We just reopened to the public for the second time in October 1st. We had been closed, and then we opened in July, and then there was a surge of cases here and we had to close down again in August. So we've been through that, as a number of museums have. I think Long Beach is still closed, is that right?
Long Beach is still closed.
So, you know, all museums are having to kind of respond in real time to this, and there's absolutely no right way to do it. You know, we're all feeling our way towards the best solution. So we're delighted to be reopened and have people here, but definitely with a kind of muted audience. Although we are gearing up for some Halloween celebrations this weekend, which we're excited about welcoming the public in. Halloween is a big deal here in Hawaii. So without further ado, we go to the next slide, if you don't mind, Amanda. I just thought I'd show you some pictures of my family. So this is me with my husband, Jim, over there in the Thai, and he is British. I met my husband, Jim, when I was living in England, in London. I was doing my PhD, and I was there for 7 years. And so Jim and I have been together for 11 years and married for 8 years. And right there in the middle is our new baby daughter, baby Minerva, baby Minnie, who is now 4 months old. And then the other picture is my older daughter, Gigi, who is 18 years old and is going to Smith College remotely right now from our living room. So we're all surviving the pandemic just like everybody else, and making it through these really difficult times. But it's just something I wanted to share with you so that I can kind of humanize myself a little bit to you. I know it's hard when we can't be together in person talking. Next slide. Wanted to share with you just a little bit about HMoA's history. It's a fantastic institution. Originally, we were called the Honolulu Academy of Arts, and founded in 1927. And our founder was a woman named Anna Rice Cook that you can see up in the corner of this slide. And Anna Rice Cook had a vision for the museum, which was really incredibly progressive for the time in which the museum was founded. And that is that she wanted to create a place where art and education would be celebrated and promoted, and that it would be for all people of Hawaii. So all people, regardless of their cultural background, would be able to come here to the museum and see the world, you know, through objects from all over the world, and also to see their own culture reflected on the walls of the museum. So really kind of inviting the public in, celebrating community, having a broader expanded view of the world through the museum and all its treasures. So she was, you know, incredibly progressive for her time, and we're all just very honored to kind of live on with this legacy that Anna Rice Cook built. And the museum itself has this very distinctive Hawaiian architecture and feeling to it. So for those of you who haven't been here, you know, it's a series of beautiful, very human scaled galleries that then connect around a series of open air courtyards, which have different themes. So we have a Mediterranean courtyard, we have a Chinese courtyard, we have what's called the Palm Courtyard, and then these really very human scaled and extremely kind of intimate galleries where our incredible collection is displayed. And it's an encyclopedic collection. So it really is objects from across time and history and all across the globe. It has a strong collection of what you would kind of call like the foundational groundworks of Western art history, you know, so Van Gogh and Monet, all those names that you recognize. But then also an incredible Asian art collection, really one of the premier Asian art collections in the world. And that has long been a strength of the museum. And then a number of smaller but very important, like what I would call global collections, right? So we have a very small but impressive Indian art collection. We have a small but impressive Filipino collection of the Philippines. So it's a global institution at a very, very human scale. And the museum, about 10 years ago, merged with another smaller museum in town called the Contemporary Museum. And what was amazing with that is that the Contemporary Museum actually gave itself as a gift to the Honolulu Academy of Arts, and they became the Honolulu Museum of Art. So it was really an incredible and transformational gift. And so in the context of this great encyclopedic collection, you also have this real commitment to contemporary art and to really embracing the art of our time and the local arts of this community. So that is the museum in a nutshell. We have a couple of slides, I think, here. Yeah, so I wanted to show you, you know, that what I was saying in the beginning about art and education being a really important part of the museum all the way going back to the beginning. This is a picture on the left of children drawing in the Mediterranean courtyard. And you just kind of see how education and connection to not only seeing and learning about art, but also making art has really been a strong unifying theme at this museum going all the way into the past. And then over here is a collection, what I believe, I haven't confirmed this, but I believe this is a photo of our lending collection, which is something that's a really wonderful part of what we have here at HMoA, which is a kind of supplementary collection that we've had throughout our history, which really is intended to be shared with the community. So they're objects that are part of the museum. They're not formally accessioned like the primary collection, but they're kind of a secondary supplementary collection that's meant to be loaned out for educational purposes. And we have some really wonderful volunteers who in recent years have really stepped up to organize that and kind of make it a very visible part of our program once more. So a lot of interesting kind of fascinating parts of our history here. And this is a little taste of the physical space that defines HMoA. So up there you have, in the upper left-hand corner, that is the Honolulu Museum of Art School. So we have classes that are taught there, currently closed because of COVID, and also because it's undergoing some major renovations. So it's going to emerge a new butterfly next year with a stronger, more sustainable infrastructure that we're excited about. And then the other images that you see are shots of the courtyards that I was mentioning. So right here on the right, that picture next to the art school, this is the view that you have when you walk in the front door of the Honolulu Museum of Art. You walk in, into this very intimately scaled, human-scaled space, but also this magnificent courtyard that unfolds right in front of you. And then down on the bottom, you see some of the other images of our courtyard. So that's on the bottom left, that is our Mediterranean courtyard. And then another courtyard in the center there, and then the magnificent Chinese courtyard on the right. So really wanted to show you how it kind of plays out in terms of the exterior spaces. And I think we have another slide of the galleries. Yeah, so here's some of the galleries, which are absolutely beautiful at HMoA. And in fact, you can see in the upper left-hand there, this magnificent statue of Guan Yin that I'm going to talk to you about in just a moment. But we're very fortunate to have these beautiful spaces, and we have a really strong collection of objects. It's about 55,000 objects that are in the Honolulu Museum of Art collection, but only a fraction of those are on display because the physical space of the museum, as I said, is quite human scaled in size. And so there's no way we could ever show everything that we have all at once. Next slide. So I wanted to talk to you today about 5 different works in the collection and just give you sort of a quick snapshot of them so that you can have a little bit of a virtual experience of HMoA even from the comfort of your living room. And so this is one of, when I first knew of the Honolulu Museum of Art, which was several years ago, and was learning about some of the special works that were here, this is one of the works that really stuck in my mind as just completely iconic of the museum. So this is a statue of Guan Yin, and she is the goddess of compassion. And she's a bodhisattva, right? So a bodhisattva is a being who has achieved nirvana, but has chosen to stay and help others reach enlightenment. And Guan Yin is a goddess figure who shows up in multiple East Asian religions in different forms. This particular work is 5.5 feet tall, 5 feet 6 inches tall. So it is actually exactly the same height that I am. So when it's hard to express it in this photo, but when you see this in the galleries, it is just absolutely magnificent because it is like a living, breathing entity sitting there with you. And it's just incredibly special. So carved of wood, it is from the 11th century, from the Song Dynasty in China. It was part of the collection from 1927. So from the year we were founded, this was part of the collection. And I should have mentioned that too, that when Anna Rice Cook, our founder, established the museum, it was with her original collection at the core. It's since grown, through generous gifts and through the wise purchases of many curators over time. But at the core was Anna Rice Cook's personal collection, and this was a very, very early work. You'll see that I'm sorry I don't have a better photo that we can't zoom in on, but I'll just entice you that you have to come see it in person. But you'll notice that Guan Yin here is wearing an elaborately carved crown. And it's adorned at the very center with a smaller Buddha figure at the very, very top, if you can see that there. And then it also has these beautiful tiny carved flower petal forms all around the crown as well. So within this single figure, there's echoes of different depictions of deities and representations of bodhisattvas from Indian art, from Japanese art from this same period and earlier. And so this work is actually this beautiful kind of not only compelling and magnificent presence within the galleries, but really representative the cross-cultural dynamic of which all artworks are born, right? Although we sometimes tend to think of an artwork as being associated with a particular country and moment, that's only part of the story, right? Because the world has long been global and interconnected. And I think this is just one of the most stunning works in our collection and a really strong reminder of that. Next slide. So this is an image that I'm sure that you will all recognize. This is The Great Wave, and it is by Hokusai. We have a fantastic collection of Japanese woodblock prints here at HMoA, and they've been extremely well stewarded and cared for over the years. We have a very generous relationship with a benefactor called the Lange Foundation, and they have long supported our efforts with Japanese artworks, and particularly with our Japanese prints. So we are extremely grateful for their support. So this Great Wave image, which of course is one of the most famous images in all of art history, and we just have this beautiful, crisp impression that we are so fortunate to have here. The Great Wave is actually from a larger body of work that's called the 36 Views of Mount Fuji. And right now we have a special exhibition that actually features all of these 36 views of Mount Fuji, of which the Great Wave is one. And so the way that our Asian art department conceived of this small exhibition, which is just beautiful and powerful, is rather than showing the entire series at once, is that one at a time we would show one image and really concentrate the viewing experience on that particular image. So they did a wonderful job in this single room exhibition that has an image on the wall so that you can see all 36 images, what they are. But in terms of the actual physical work that's present in the gallery, it's only one at a time. So very soon the Great Wave is going to be on display. We rarely put it on display because we're trying to preserve it in perpetuity. So it's very, very special that we have this. And I just wanted to read you a great quote that our new Director of Curatorial Affairs shared with me the other day when we were talking about this work. And it's actually from Vincent van Gogh writing to his brother Theo in 1888, having seen this work in person, part of this series, not at HMoA, but elsewhere. He said, "The Great Wave makes you cry out. I did not know that one could be so terrifying with blue and green. But in this case, with his lines, his drawing, you say to yourself, these waves are claws and the boat is caught in them and you can feel it." And so that is the really resonant and magic power of this image, you know, which has delighted generations of people around the world and really has become one of the most iconic images in art history. So wanted to share that with you as well. Next slide. This is another work which I love in the collection. It is actually a painting by the artist Alice Neel, a really important 20th century female painter, really focused on the figure throughout her career. And she, you know, was one of these artists that I love because she was completely committed to her craft and her art, regardless of whether she was successful or not. And in fact, she did not find success until she was in really late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And really, that was when she was at the peak of her career. So this is a work actually that Alice Neel painted in 1981. She died in 1984, so this is right towards the end of her life. She was known for creating these really intense, sensitive, very beautiful but very true psychological portraits of women in particular. And this is a painting of the artist Marisol, who's actually another really important 20th century female artist. Marisol was a Venezuelan sculptor, mainly lived in New York, had been raised in France. And, you know, to have this work in the collection, I think is just really, really special when you know the history behind who Alice Neel was, this, you know, this powerhouse of late 20th century, mid 20th century and late 20th century figure painting. And Marisol, who was this really important, not often talked about female artist of the pop art movement and beyond, creating these figurative sculptures. And so, you know, I like to think about this work as a conversation, right, between these two dynamic female artists. And you know, the image here is very indicative of how Alice Neal paints, right? Which is that it somehow manages to be very realistic without using realism, right? I mean, it has kind of a cartoonish quality, and yet it is so psychologically effective. When we look at it, we feel like we are seeing this person's life etched on their face. You know, their posture, how they sit, how they hold themselves, the stories that we all hold within our own physicality, right? That's what Alice Neal was so incredible about conveying. And this is really a signature work of Alice Neal's, in that it has this white blank background. They don't always have that, but they often do, especially towards the end of her life. It was about just getting away from everything that was complicating in the background, because it was all about the figure and the portrait of the person being represented. So that was a work I wanted to share with you. Next slide. Then this great work by Georgia O'Keeffe. So Waterfall number 3. So they, who knows, raise your hand that Georgia O'Keeffe actually had paintings from Hawaii. Did anybody know that? So Georgia O'Keeffe came here in 1939. It was on a trip sponsored by what was later the Dole Pineapple Company. And she came because she was commissioned to paint pineapples. And she didn't feel particularly inspired when she was here. She actually didn't end up painting the pineapple successfully until weeks later back in her studio in New York. But what she did do was create this really dramatic and stunning series of landscapes and waterfalls from Hawaii, which, you know, have that everything that makes a signature O'Keeffe. It's a fairly small painting, so it's about this big. And, you know, very, very well suited to the scale of the galleries here at HMoA. You have this kind of close, intimate connection with it. And again, that play, which is such a famous play in O'Keeffe's paintings, between a landscape that seems to be a body in and of itself, right? There's always a very kind of figurative, human quality to the landscape, right? And she was also, it's a little bit hard to see in this image, but I promise you, a master colorist, just understanding absolutely what color should go where and how that could really make a canvas sing. And so we are incredibly lucky here at HMoA to have approximately a quarter of the paintings that she, and maybe even a third of the paintings that she created while she was here in Hawaii. So this is a really special work that I hope that you'll be able to come and see in person as we progress through the years. Next image. And then the final work I wanted to share with you was this special work, which is really a masterpiece of Native Hawaiian art. It's a feather cape from the late 18th century, early 19th century. And these capes would have been reserved for Native Hawaiian royalty. And there was an incredible kind of process that went into the harvesting of the feathers that make up this cape. And what they would do is they would actually capture the birds and pluck from them a few feathers at a time and then release them. And so in that way, they would harvest what they needed to make these works and then release the birds. And they were, you know, seen as feathers often are in indigenous art throughout the world, as really having this powerful connection between the land and the heavenly bodies, right? That birds are this powerful entity that kind of crosses between both spaces, both planes of existence. So there's a number of these works that are here in Hawaii. We're very lucky to have this incredibly beautiful example here. And for our museum, you know, we are constantly looking to how can we celebrate and acknowledge the Native Hawaiian history and bring that to the fore of the museum experience. It's a very, very important part of our local community. And, you know, it's something that I'm excited to be working on as I come on board as director and think about all the different areas that our collection represents. And as I said in the beginning, the museum is really meant to be encyclopedic. It's really meant to be a celebration of global works from around the world. So the works I've shown to you right now are just a small sample, a little taste of the Honolulu Museum of Art but that was what I wanted to share with you today, and would be very happy to kind of open it up for questions and discussion. Anything you'd like to know about the museum. Oh, and then Qingzhen, my colleague, has wonderfully added this slide, which we're so appreciative of. Here you can check out our Museum from Home at this website link. And Museum from Home is a great initiative that we've been working on throughout the course of the pandemic. And our education and curatorial teams have really been hard at work creating content that then can live online. So that really enriches the experience of the works in the galleries. We now have QR codes in the galleries that you can scan and see these extra videos and informational components that surround the work that we've been really working to enrich, but then also has a kind of virtual counterpart. So if you can't come to the museum, you can experience it from your home too. And so we're really, really pleased with that. And then Qingzhen's contact information is here as well. We really would love to know when you're in Hawaii so we can give you an in-person tour. And we are just incredibly blessed to work at this museum and to preserve this incredible legacy. So just wanted to share that with you today. And again, really pleased and honored to be invited to be here. I understand that you guys spoke to Tony Marsh last time. Tony Marsh is one of my favorite artists. And I'll just also say that I hope you know, because you talked to Tony, that the ceramics program, which is at California State Long Beach, is just one of the most incredible programs in the entire country. And you guys are incredibly lucky to have that right in your midst. And Tony Marsh is the best of the best. So those are big shoes for me to follow. But really happy to be chatting with you today and share a little bit about our incredible museum with you.
Well, Halona, I have to say, Tony was disappointed that he couldn't be here tonight, but he's actually doing tutorials at the ceramics department this evening, so that's why he couldn't join us. I have a comment and a question, and the comment is about Hokusai's 36 views of Mount Fuji. Claude Monet studied those and was actually the inspiration for his 36 haystacks in different light, different seasons. Some of you may recall a number of years ago, LACMA did a wonderful exhibition of many of them, not all 36 of them, in a circular room. And what he said was that it was the impact that Hokusai actually studied the same object from different views and different times of year, different aspects, and that the practice of it was so intense. And so then he created the 36 haystacks. So I'm so glad that you showed that. My question is actually about, and forgive me if I say this terribly wrong, is it Guanyin? The incredibly beautiful wood carving. You said that it was painted wood. Was it polychrome originally, much like the ancient Roman statues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would suspect that it was. You know, some of the remnants of the painting are there, but it really does have now just kind of the faintest wash of color. But I would definitely suspect that, yeah, it was polychrome.
So it's probably more vivid.
It would absolutely have been more vivid. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very, as I said, just a striking, powerful work now, especially when you know the scale and experience that in person. But yes, it must have been, you know, in its 11th century form, you know, truly something incredible to behold.
It's so beautiful, just like it is.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we open it up to questions? And I think probably the best thing to do is if you have a question, just unmute yourself and speak. Margaret, I see you.
Hi, Susan.
Hi,
Thanks
Margaret.
for letting me board the plane.
Boy, last minute.
I know, I was running through the terminal like crazy. I had a question for Halona. Did the Watermill family contribute any art to the Indian collection?
Yeah, yeah. So as I mentioned in my presentation, you know, the Indian collection that we have is relatively small compared to some of the other collections that make up HMoA, but it is a powerhouse, and the Watermill family that is, you know, very well established in Honolulu,
right,
played a central part in creating that for us. So we're very fortunate to have their support and to have had their support for so long. Indru Wadamal, who was up until recently on our board and has long been involved with the museum as a docent for more than 40 years, was really instrumental in helping create that collection here.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have other
I
questions?
have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Avalon. Lovely presentation, Halona. Thank you. I'm curious about the connection between the Shangri-La and the Honolulu Museum of Art.
Yeah, so we have a long partnership with Doris Duke's Shangri-La Museum, which is a separate museum, but one that we have a really special relationship with. So about 10 miles from the museum is where Doris Duke's historic home that was created, kind of as this fantasy property with these incredible Islamic architectural influences. It exists, so just about 10 miles away. And we've had a partnership with them for a number of years where people actually come to our museum and we have a satellite gallery of Shangri-La here so they can see some of the objects that were part of the Doris Duke collection. And then we also transport them to the museum because being a fantastic residence, it is actually still in a residential area. And so they can't easily accommodate parking there. And so we've had this really wonderful collaboration for a number of years with them so that people can kind of come to HMoA and then see Shangri-La very easily. And it really works very, very well for both of us. That's been a little bit on pause because of COVID, but we'll look to start that back up again, hopefully in the spring, but just like you guys at Long Beach, we're having to adapt every month, every minute, as we get through this difficult time.
And are the objects that are in Shangri-La, are they all just the original ones, or are there added works of art in there?
I don't know. I mean, it's primarily, as far as I know, the original objects or things that are in the spirit of the original objects, right? As you often have with a historic home. So, there's these beautiful kind of velvet settees that are there, right? They've probably been reupholstered. I would imagine they wouldn't have lasted that long without some freshening up. So sort of that sort of thing definitely happens. But no, I mean, it's very true to Doris Duke's vision of Shangri-La. And they have really wonderful leadership as well and have kind of really been re-energized in recent years to think about Shangri-La as a place for the community and for the kind of tourism that comes to the island and just thinking about not just a kind of static place that's a historic home, but really Shangri-La as a kind of center for the community and an activator of really interesting and dynamic programs. So we're really pleased to have the relationship with them. They do an artist residency program, which is something that we have shared with them at times in the past and kind of done joint presentations. And that's something I imagine would continue into the future. So I hope that this is enticing enough that you guys are all going to come as a group to Honolulu as soon as it is, looking like a place that people feel comfortable traveling again. I know this is a really difficult time to make plans, but we would be so happy to welcome your group here.
We want the next flight to be real. It would be fantastic. It is interesting, museums across the country, everyone is trying to figure out how to open safely. And it's, there's so much work that goes into it, so much thought. Richard, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so we've been involved with the museum there for a number of years, and it's when we have friends come to visit when we're on the island, one of our favorite stops is the museum because it's a bit of a surprise. The quality and the expanse of the collection, it just knocks your socks off. We've had the pleasure of actually being able to be toured through the vaults,
Mm.
and it's just incredible. So I recommend it's a must see when you're making a stop in Honolulu.
What a great treat to be able to see behind the scenes. That's always my favorite. That's fantastic. I have another question, actually. So you touched on the works from the Hawaiian collection, the traditional Hawaiian collection. Do you also collect kind of the, how can I say it? Well, I guess it'd be more like the popular culture side of Hawaii.
That's a great question. We have some examples of that, but not as a kind of formalized collection in and of itself. Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, I mean, I think that we do have a strong tradition here and collection of textiles that both encompass you know, more traditional textiles and have branched out into more contemporary textiles as well. So the things that we have that speak to that more kind of contemporary popular culture in that sense would probably be contained within that collection.
That's interesting. What do you say would be the largest part of your collection?
It's pretty equally divided. So as I was saying, you know, there's a couple ways to think about it. Recently, I've been thinking, you know, and explaining it in this way, sort of, is that there is a few different sort of foundational and strong pillars that define the collection. So one of them would be that, you know, Western art historical canon, like I was talking about, right? That's the Cassatt and the Van Gogh and the Manet and everything that you recognize as kind of a great Western art historical museum canon quality. And then, you know, the Asian collection is extremely superb and is about a third of our entire holding. So the quality work for work in the Asian collection is just so strong and is a very, very important part of who we are. Then you also have these smaller kind of global collections, right? And I was talking about the art of India, the art of the Philippines, that are part of that as well, small Native American collection. And so that's another component. And then you also have the emphasis on contemporary, which really came about from the merger that we had with the Contemporary Museum. And, you know, my background is as a modern contemporary curator, but I really have a deep love for encyclopedic collections that really speak to kind of just the global interconnectedness of the world. And so to me, that's also the kind of museum I'm coming from Toledo. I was very excited to come to Honolulu, where there is this commitment to contemporary, but that's within the framework of a global collection and really kind of supporting these different areas to tell the story of the world, right? And like that Kuan Yin demonstrates so beautifully, right? It's like there's all this kind of just beautiful, rich interconnectedness of cultures, you know, not only present, but past. And I think for me, that's one of the really exciting things about the Honolulu Museum of Art, that we have so many great things in the permanent collection to play with and to tell different stories. And, you know, that 36 Views of Mount Fuji exhibition that we have right now is a great example of that, right? It's one series of many and one of thousands of works that we have here at HMoA, but it can be just presented in such a beautiful way that it really makes that time and place come to life within the gallery. So I just find that incredibly exciting. You know, I mean, you can tell I love museums. So I love this museum. I love nearly every museum that I go to. They all have something special, right? They all have a special connection to their local community and also kind of to the global community, a connection there. And that's what I really find exciting and inspiring.
I agree with you. I'm on the same page. Richard and Kurt, you're raising your hand.
Yeah. So Halona, can you maybe just speak just a little bit about the 30 Americans exhibit earlier this year? Only in the context, what made us so excited about that exhibit was that it was a first for the museum in the genre, and just about the commitment to remain relevant, you know, and as culture or culture and culture.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. So we had a presentation that got a little bit interrupted by COVID. So it was kind of shown in two parts, the beginning of the year and then when we reopened in July. We had an exhibition called 30 Americans. And this is a collection, an exhibition that's been traveling around the US, the mainland, for some time. And it's from the Rubel family collection. It is 30 contemporary African-American artists, really artists that are just at the top of their game, creating a really kind of visually diverse range of work. So it was a very, very exciting exhibition, both in terms of the quality and the different kinds of work, but then also, of course, you know, really creating a space for contemporary African-American art within our museum, which is, you know, part of our, you know, commitment to diversity and to expanding the museum's offerings, right? And also thinking about, as we look forward in the future, you know, how do we kind of take the strong foundation that we have, but also look inward and say, well, what parts of the collection don't speak to kind of all the perspectives and diverse experiences out there in the world, and where can we really build on the strengths and really expand this story? I mean, that's what it's about. We're committed to being an encyclopedic museum, and we want there to be a range of voices, past and present, within these walls. And so we were sad to have that at the exact time that it happened, but we were very, very happy to also have it during 2020. I think that it's been really powerful for our community and just a really incredible show. Because of our location in the middle of the Pacific, it's hard for us to do these traveling exhibitions. They're expensive for museums, but they're extra expensive for us because we have to ship across the ocean. So when we do them, we want to make sure that they are very, very much kind of adding to the offerings of what we already have, either, you know, building on a strength or really augmenting something that's not there yet. And so that's been very, very special for our community to have that exhibition here. And that was already underway when I came, so I can take no personal credit for that, but I was delighted that we had it here. And we had just an incredibly strong outpouring of support and excitement from the community around
it. I have a question if I, so I'm actually in Hawaii, I'm in Kailua, and so I have a comment and then I have a question. So my comment is the Art After Dark program was, and you know, back to Kurt and Richard, what they said about it being a surprise. It really was such an amazing opportunity to bring in this very contemporary crowd with music and food and culture and themes, and it was like a who's who in Honolulu. Really, really great. So hopefully in the future it'll come back. As talking about staying relevant in the community and sharing with the surprise that is inside the walls. My question though is, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the history and acquisition of Anna Rice Cook in the collection, and kind of, you know, was it her travels? Was she focused? You know, did it come out of in the estate? I mean, how did that kind of, that transaction?
Yeah, I'm still learning about that too, but I'm happy to share with you, you know, what I've learned, because you know, my PhD was actually in the history of museums and the history of collections. So I'm especially interested in kind of how our museum got started and what the initial vision was, and Anna Rice Cook's work, you know. So I think that I spoke a little bit at the beginning about how she really had this very specific intention to make this a global museum for the local community. I mean, that was just very, very specific in her stated intention, and also reflected in what was in the collection. So in the beginning, a lot of it was her personal collection, and because of our location, there was a definite emphasis on Asian art. And she just had an incredible collection of Asian art. So, you know, you look at that Guanyin from 1927, that's the year the museum opened. But also really a strong emphasis on those great kind of Western art history classical works. That was also something that she had a passion for. And interestingly, as I've kind of looked into some of the formation of the collection and those early works, she had a real soft spot for kind of depictions of family and children. And a lot of the early works in the collection really speak to this kind of feminine perspective and sort of maternal instinct and interest, which I find, very, very interesting and quite unique, actually.
Halona, do you, because of where you are located geographically, you kind of piqued my interest when you were talking about how expensive it is to bring in an exhibition from somewhere else, which I understand. Do you does the museum also bring in exhibitions from other parts of the world besides the United States? On the Pacific Rim, perhaps?
That's a good question. Our Asian art curatorial team has connections, in China and Japan in particular, and so has from time to time had kind of object exchanges or exhibitions that originate from partnerships in those countries. But we're not one of those museums that has a kind of continual cycle of exhibitions, just not at the frequency of a place like LACMA, right? Not something like that. It's more when it makes sense and when it's really going to add something different to the permanent collection experience, right? And so yeah, they have come from other places besides the US mainland, but in general, overall, because of our location, they're not, exhibitions aren't quite a central part of what we do as probably other museums on the mainland of comparable size. Going forward, as we kind of, look through, I think we're all having, exhaustion from the pandemic, right? Kind of wondering how much longer it's going to go on and not feeling like we have great clarity around that. It's making it very difficult for us to plan, in our lives, in our professional lives in every aspect, right? So we're all living with that. And that of course impacts, what we're doing here at the museum. But one thing that we will definitely be doing in the years to come, which was part of the plan anyway, but now kind of greatly intensified by COVID, is that we really want to do more work with our permanent collection. I mean, we just have a fantastic permanent collection. So we really want to very intentionally try and tell some of these very dynamic stories that exist behind the objects. I only talked to you about 5 works. Well, we have 55,000 of those, right? So there's a lot more that our museum, and I think museums in general, can do to really share what are the stories behind the permanent collection. How is that relevant to people's lives now? And so we're excited to do that. And the other thing I'm really excited to do is to create a stronger artist residency program here and work one-on-one with living artists. Because while it's not easy to ship in works here, it's relatively easy to convince people to come and stay in Hawaii for a while and create an incredible work for the museum. And so that's something that we'll be exploring further in the future. But again, the timing of those things, in terms of the artist residency at least, is influenced by the current circumstances with the pandemic. So we're busy planning and dreaming of the day when things are back to a greater sense of normalcy. And in reference to the remark that was made about Art After Dark, this is a great program that we've had that really brings people into the museum on a Friday evening, having a glass of wine, looking at the artwork. And I'm sure I speak for all of you as well that we're just longing to get back to a time where we can gather together again. And so those things will become part of the museum once again, but safety is our #1 concern, and it has to be, right? Because we, people are the most important thing. We love art, but people are the most important thing. And that's how we're structuring our plans as well.
I have a question for Halona. Is the museum the benefactor of any of the collection of the Twigg-Smith family?
Yeah, so the Twigg-Smith family was really the force behind the Contemporary Museum. So I had mentioned we had that merger 10 years ago with the Contemporary, and that was really something that the Twigg-Smith family had built. So very, very much that collection and that legacy lives on in our museum.
Good to hear that. I know that they were big supporters of a number of the artists I represent, and everyone loved her, just thought she was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that that lives on there.
Yeah, and you know, that is the special thing about you know, donating incredible art to a museum, right? It's your legacy. Your legacy lives on, and certainly for that family, the presence will always be here at the museum because of that.
Good. Thank you.
Just an interesting comment. We've been at the museums many times, but there was a story about Rice Cook, about her trying to educate the children in Hawaii. And she would take some of these valuable, what we would consider absolutely gorgeous, wonderful Monet or Renoir, throw it in the car and take it to a school.
To the North Shore.
To the North Shore, and teach the children about this and then bring it back.
But we wondered if that was just an urban legend or if that was actually true, because it's supposed to be the inspiration for the Art to Go program. And we could just imagine her saying to the chauffeur, "Oh, James, throw the Rembrandt in the boot and we'll go to the North Shore today." But was that true? That she actually...
I think it's true. I mean,
Okay.
I absolutely think it's true. And, you know, that's also connected to the origin of what I was talking about with the lending collection, right?
Right.
That's how that kind of was built up over time. As far as I understand, the lending collection was part of the museum from the very beginning. And I think some of the priceless things were included in that initially. Over time, it kind of became, you know, objects that you would feel more comfortable lending out rather than just the Renoir. But yeah, I mean, it also kind of speaks to this incredible transition that museums have gone to. You know, we're coming up now to what will be our 100-year anniversary, and just museums, you know, 2020 versus 1920, it's a different universe, right? The things you used to be able to do, the things that you didn't have to worry about, all those things were very, very different, right? Museums, funny thing, like working in museums professionally of this age is that they never have enough space for staff offices, ever. There's never, and it's because they had a very small staff initially. Right? They didn't anticipate that they would have a staff of 100 people. So every museum that is of this age, early 1900s or 1910s, 1920s, always has this incredible crunch of people in strange office spaces. And I think that's like a funny kind of shared reality that's you know, behind the scenes of being a museum professional.
Halona, I don't think it's any different in the 21st century. There's never enough office space in a museum. Nor
This
is
is
there
maybe not a fair question, but has anything ever been stolen?
You know, not that I know of. I mean, I wouldn't say no that it definitely hasn't, but no, we don't have stories like that.
Yeah, no.
When I worked in Toledo, we had a story of a work that, you know, what was being transported to another museum that was stolen off of a truck, and then there was an investigation, and you know, the forces mobilized, and it was returned to the museum within 48 hours. So that kind of stuff does happen, and you know, museums never like to talk about that. And you know, when
It's an island also, so.
yeah, when things go out on loan, you know, that's why museums now, being professionalized, have very strict standards in place. And you know, it's part of the museum profession that we really try not to talk about when the particulars of our works are going out on loan, right? All of that is to try and you know, protect the artwork, which is what we're here for. So no, I think it's a good question, because there's always intrigue around that sort of thing.
I'm just cruising through all the squares to see if there's any more questions out there. Halona, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be invited, and I can't wait to have you all here at the museum in person.
I know.
You know, Zoom is a poor substitute for connection, but it's the best we have. So it's
the best we have, exactly. And it allowed us to do this. Avalon, my co-chair, where are you?
I'm here.
Okay. Would you like to wrap this evening up?
Well, Halona, this was way more fascinating than I expected it to be. Not that I had low expectations, but I really enjoyed your presentation. And I love it that Lisa, my daughter-in-law who lives in Hawaii, which is too far, but not as far as Japan,
Hi, Lisa.
joined us. And Kurt and Richard, thank you for making this possible.
Welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And thank you all. I don't know what the score is on the Dodger game, but going to check that out very soon. And what can I say? Aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Hello.
Oh, thank you so much.
See ya.
Thanks to our stewardesses too.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Lisa.
No,
Hi,
thank
yeah, it's good to see you guys.
seeing you.
Bye. Bye.
And
Bye.
Xing Jen, thank you so much for being the orchestrator of this whole thing. You made it
Well,
happen.
thank you so much for having us.
Thanks,
hey,
Jing.
Barry, what's the score?
Okay.
What's the score? Unmute Barry and tell us what the score is.
She's trying to figure it out.
Uh,
The Razorhead.
What's the score,
1-0.
1-0, Tampa.
Okay,
One
so
to
never,
nothing.
so never in my life did I think the end of a museum tour was going to be sports.
very good.
It's a world museum.
Yeah.
It's a World Series.
Yeah, there you go. It's historic.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Aloha,
Thank you so
mahalo.
much. Thank you.
Aloha.
Wonderful. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much. It was great.
Don't you have this end Zoom?